Hi there.
Hello, hello. I'm just so we are live with participants joining, and I'm preparing the YouTube stream because I think we may be oversubscribed on the webinar platform.
There he is, Dr. Dan.
Hey, John McPhee.
How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm good.
Good to
I'm
see you.
good.
I don't
You
get to see
too.
enough of you.
No, sir. You're going to come into our gala again, June 3rd.
Yes, I am. But I didn't see where you could buy individual tickets.
I'll send you the links because they'll
Okay,
send you I'll send you the links, yeah.
thank you. And then maybe you could just give me an offer while I'm there, and then we can see each other a lot more.
All right, let's talk about it.
All right.
It's a Monday, so come in on Sunday. We'll go to dinner.
Okay. Let me see if I can work that out.
Right on.
Are you ready for today?
So, wait, when you say we're live, do you mean that everybody can hear me and Dan talking to each other?
Everyone can hear you. That's part of the magic of these sessions. We are
All
unfiltered
right,
and
Dan, we're on
always
blast.
be recording here. Always be recording. It's like the Dax Shepard podcast when they start recording as soon as the guest comes in. That's how we do it.
Well,
Um,
it's good. It's good that people can hear that work is happening 24/7.
Never stops. Absolutely.
Never stops. We're all everybody's putting in their time. Everybody's
Yeah.
changing the world.
Well, and what I loved about this experience of putting this together is that it seems to me that the top-notch experts on this topic, you all know each other. You all collaborate with each other. Um, that's
Yes.
that's good to know.
We need everybody to collaborate more really to get things to scale. That's really one of the things that I think is truly important. Really in every aspect of mental health and suicide prevention. People
Mhm.
could do more collaborating and bring things up to scale, we might see bigger impact.
Yes, absolutely. This is exactly our agenda, even though we are admittedly not within clinical practice of suicide prevention. Um, this is absolutely our agenda. The more we can bring people together across primary care, schools, communities, bring parents together, be part of the solution, the better things get.
You are doing that today.
Yes, we try.
We try. It's nice to meet you both. Thank you so much for
You
joining us
too.
today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for asking us. Great to
Yeah,
meet you, Minji.
Great to
thank
meet
you
you as
for
well.
asking us.
Okay, so we got about 4 or 5 minutes
How many
left.
people you got watching?
Right now, 130, I mean, 130 some, 135. We've had over 3,000 people register. Um, yeah.
It's
Pretty
awesome.
good, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Many of whom, I mean, I like to review um, participants and we ask what is your primary reason? So we got a good mix. We got obviously parents and caregivers, we got primary care providers, we have teachers, we have policymakers. So I'm hoping that and I think with the feedback from all of you on the discussion, the topics that we all want to hit today, I think we're gonna have a nice mix of actionable advice, and that's really the theme of the day. The more actionable we can make it, and the more solution oriented, the better it is. We're up to
Oh,
160. Yeah, we'll give people a few minutes here.
and this is going to live somewhere. It's going to be out there for people to watch afterwards.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. So we record these and then we put them on YouTube, put them on our website, and we send a recording, basically a link to the recording to everyone that registers, and that's just available for free forever. That's the whole point of it. Judith Gonzalez. So yeah, we'll be sending a recording. We will not be sending slides simply because today there are no slides. We have found that slides sort of provide an experience that's less of a conversation, much more of a talking head lecture. And we try to make this a conversation. So you'll see today the experts answer questions, build on each other's points, answer questions live from the audience. And that's the experience that we want to provide. Teresa, I don't think the sound is off. I'm hoping that the sound is on. If someone from the 200 plus people in the audience can put in the Q&A and just indicate to me that you can hear us, that'll be helpful. Yes, we can. Thank you so much. Thank you. Hey. We are just
All we need is Jill.
yes. She is still technically on time if she shows up now. I always think about the story of the Coach Coffin from the New York Giants. One of his receivers shows up and the bus leaves. It's like, but coach, I showed up on time. It says on time is 5 minutes late. Let me email Jill just to make sure.
There she is.
There we go.
Hello, Dr. Friedman. How are you?
Hi, good. Parker B. Friedman, but I'll stop there. How are you?
Very good.
Good.
Very
Doing
good.
well, Jill. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. I had trouble finding the link. I've also been homesick for over a week, so my general faculties are back sort of, but I'm gonna take it slow
All right,
and,
Jill.
and probably
Okay.
go on mute when I start coughing.
Right on. Jill, so you know that at the top though, that everyone can hear us right now.
Yes, so I'm just letting people know I will be on mute so nobody hears me coughing.
That's quite all right.
Well, you get the prize for dedication and commitment.
I think we're all pretty dedicated,
Yes, indeed.
and I'm grateful to be here with all of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So we're approaching 400 people here, so I think
Fantastic.
we can get started. All right. So my name is Shai Adelson. I'm one of the founders of Fort Health. We're a mental practice providing care for children and families in New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania. Along with care, we provide free educational materials for families all over the world, and that's the point of today. Each month, we bring together clinical leaders and researchers to discuss a topic that affects the mental health and well-being of young people. This month's topic is the hardest one that we have ever discussed. So I think before we continue any further, I do feel compelled to read the following notice. This webinar discusses topics related to teen suicide, including identifying at-risk individuals, providing support, and intervention strategies. This content may be distressing or triggering some participants, particularly those who have personal experience with suicide or severe mental health challenges. If you feel the need to step away, if this is too much, by all means, you have our blessing. Again, a recording will be sent. More importantly, if you or someone you know needs to talk to someone right now, you can text, call, or you can chat. There's 988. It's a free confidential, a conversation with a trained counselor 24/7. You can also contact the crisis text line by texting HOME to 741-741. And if this is a medical emergency, if there's someone in immediate danger or harm, please, please, please call 911. Explain that you need support for a mental health crisis. The goal this evening is we want to give you, families, educators, policymakers, hopefully young people, we want to give you practical tools that you could use. And to guide us through this difficult but also important topic, I think we have assembled some of the nation's leading suicide prevention and mental health experts. So joined us last, so we will introduce her first. Jill Herkaya Friedman is the Senior Vice President of Research at the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, where she spearheads the organization's efforts to understand and prevent suicide through education and advocacy. In addition to her work with the foundation, she is an associate professor at Columbia University, where she co-leads initiatives aimed at studying the neurobiology of suicidal behavior. John McPhee is the CEO of the JED Foundation, an organization dedicated to protecting emotional health and preventing suicide among teens and young adults. JED Foundation partners with high schools and colleges to strengthen their mental health programs and resources to equip young people with the skills needed to navigate life's challenges. Dr. Lindsay Henderson is a clinical director at Fort Health. She is also a clinical child psychologist with hands-on experience treating youth at risk. While at McLean Hospital in Boston, Dr. Henderson worked with hundreds of youth and families struggling with suicidality and self-harm. And last but absolutely not least is Dr. Daniel Reidenberg, Executive Director of Suicide Awareness Voice of Education, SAVE, Managing Director of the National Council for Suicide Prevention, and the U.S. Representative to the International Association for Suicide Prevention. He published dozens of articles and book chapters on suicide prevention and developed one of the only three evidence-based programs for schools listed on the National Registry of Evidence-Based Programs. That is a long introduction, but important for participants here to know that we have the foremost experts here. So I'm going to call you by your first names. I hope that's okay, just to streamline discussion. So Dan, actually, I'm going to start with you. According to the CDC, suicide is the second leading cause of death among young people ages 4 to 24. That is a very alarming, sweeping statistic. How prevalent really is suicide among young people? And can you give us a bit of context and a bit of nuance?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. Good to be among esteemed colleagues, and thank you to Fort Health for putting this on. Really important, and to all those people who are watching live and that will be watching as a recording, because we need more awareness and more education and understanding of this topic. And some of that does really start with the numbers. You used the word alarming, and it really is alarming. The latest data from the CDC is provisional data, so we can't go with that. That's the 22, and it's still provisional. So the most current data is from 2021. In 2021, we lost 7,135 youth that were between the ages of 4 and 24 years of age. Over 7,000 kids died. Now, most kids don't die. And when they do die, it tends to be from suicide, not at the very youngest ages. Suicide among 0 to 4, 0 to 5 is statistically insignificant. Even when we get to the 5 to 9 range, it's very, very small. It's not even 1% per 100,000 young people that are dying. But then we start seeing this real increase. If you look at 10 to 14-year-olds, you're talking about almost 2 per 100,000 people. 15 to 19, you're talking 8, almost 9 per 100,000. And then the 20 to 24 age range, we have 14 per 100,000. Overall, we're seeing that, as you mentioned, this is a leading cause of death for young people. Now, some good news here, and we should pay attention to the good news, is between 2021 and 2022, there was a small decrease among some of the age groups. We actually had an 18% drop. That's not small, but an 18% drop among suicide for that 10 to 14-year-old age range, and a 9% decrease in suicide for the 15 to 24-year-old age range. Only one of those was statistically significant, however. The point is that we're losing too many young people, and not only to suicide, but we're even struggling with them having thoughts of suicide. If you look at the most current youth risk behavior survey data, you see that 60% of kids in high school are saying they are feeling sad and hopeless. 25% of females are thinking about suicide. We have about 40% that are talking about they're so sad that it's difficult for them to function academically. 20% are making a plan to take their life. Now, the good news is that it's stable among actual number of attempts. It's about 2 to 3%. That hasn't changed. So to sum up, It's far too many young people that are dying by suicide, that are thinking about suicide, making plans for suicide. But the good news is that in some areas we are making progress, and that is saving lives.
Thank you. John, are there external factors that put some young people more at risk than others?
Yeah, so I mean, there are external factors that certainly are risk factors. The first I want to name, and perhaps perhaps it's not an external factor, but I think we need to name it, is this is the age of expression for many mental illnesses, right, and substance use problems. And so, it's important, and a lot of young people are yet to be diagnosed, they're undiagnosed, and they're untreated. So I'd say that that's the first factor. Physical health conditions, chronic conditions, pain conditions, traumatic brain injury as an example. These also can be factors that can increase suicide risk. And there are also a number of macro environmental stressors, I would call them, that include things like bullying or cyberbullying, academic pressure, financial pressure, employment or unemployment pressures, relationship problems, racism, bias, that are causing significant stress among young people today, where the data are showing really high levels of anxiety around climate, school shootings, war, polarization. So there's really just a lot that young people are dealing with that can come into this equation and cause real stress. Additional factors are childhood trauma. History of abuse, neglect is a risk factor, a history of suicidal behavior, family history of suicidal behavior. Also, very importantly, is access to potential lethal means. We know that suicidal urges or impulses can be fleeting, and it's really important. We don't want people to be able to access firearms or other mechanisms. Therefore, we want to make sure the environments are safe. So these are a number of the external factors that need to be considered.
Right. Thank you. So now we've discussed the prevalence and the factors. Jill, I want to turn over to you. What are the common, even if sometimes less obvious, cries for help or red flags that people listening to this should be looking for?
I think we have to think about suicide as complex, and that really there are many factors, many of which John mentioned, that come together in the context of stress. Because, as you said, all kids are feeling these stressors, but they're not all at risk for taking their lives. So it's understanding a person's risk factors and then the stressors they're in, and then if you have access to lethal means, you could actually die by suicide. So it's important to know your people, your friends, your family, your kids. Know what are those factors do they have already? How is their mental health? People do show signs that they might be at risk for suicide, but they typically don't announce it. And often the suicidal crisis will come on quickly. So there are signs in the way people talk, in how they behave, and what their moods are, such as talking about death, talking about not wanting to be here anymore. Sometimes kids will say, next year this time it won't matter anymore. And also behaviors, and with kids in particular, risky behavior. And that's why it's called, reckless and risky, because you might actually hurt yourself as a result of it. So that could be something like, skateboarding without a helmet. It could be walking the streets at 3 a.m. And then there's your mood. So we all think about depression as a sign of suicide risk, but most people who are depressed do not even think about suicide, let alone take their life. But it is a mood that we often see, often irritability or agitation. And one thing that I didn't mention is substance use, which is a big issue. And with kids, I want to raise another risk factor that can show signs, which is head injury, especially with sports. So let's say somebody has had a head injury, that can lead to increased impulsiveness, changes in personality, changes in capacity. So I've just listed off a bunch of things that you might see, but I don't think that list is all that helpful. So what I would say is know the person And if you notice anything, it never hurts to ask. That just because someone's thinking about suicide or ending their life or feeling in that pain doesn't mean that they're at risk for dying by suicide. So we have to have these conversations to find out more. If you find yourself, and these are like your own warning signs, not about the person in your life. If you find yourself making excuses for why a person is behaving the way they are, oh, they have a bad teacher, oh, work is hard, that's a sign that you ought to check in with them about what's going on. If their thinking is more rigid and inflexible, that's a sign to have a conversation, because it may mean that they're having trouble making good decisions, looking at all the options that are there. And so I want to say there are warning signs, but don't wait for a moment of risk.
Yeah.
We should be checking in regularly and wondering about how our loved ones are doing and having that conversation, because you will not make someone suicidal. We just finished saying how complex it is. And so many factors coming together in a point of time, the likelihood that you're going to find them at a point of crisis is also less, but it's that time in between to stay in contact and stay connected. And look for signs that the person is not really connecting with you.
Thank you. I want to dive one sort of step deeper. Oftentimes, as a parent, a lot of the conversation around parents is, well, how am I supposed to distinguish between, let's call it typical teenage moodiness and potential warning signs? So Lindsay, any tips that you have, any advice for parents on how we can do that?
Yes, the key word to keep in mind here is a sudden change, a change. So is the moodiness, is the typical teenage angst or difficulty or unpredictability, is there a change from the normal? A change in functioning, as Jill said, sleep, withdrawing from social activities, school performance, alcohol, drug use. All of this is change. That's what I want parents to take away, is if you're really observing something different, a change from the usual stuff, that's something to certainly pay attention to. A couple of things that also to keep in mind with teens, adolescents, is unlike adults who may plan and be more purposeful in a suicide attempt, children are much more likely to be impulsive. And so some of the things that we look for, or, those of us trained as professionals may look for or see as warning signs, like saying goodbye, giving away your most favorite things, the things that are important to you. Sometimes people you observe actually a huge sense of calm and relief because they have finally made the decision to be at peace and go forth with an action to harm themselves. And that's less likely with children because they are more impulsive in the moment, and they are often, we talk about suicide as a permanent solution to a temporary problem with kids, and extending that thinking out a little bit more to get them through the moment is important. But change, Shai, that is the key to keep in mind as we all navigate the seas of raising adolescents.
Yeah, thank you. Jill, again, I'm going back to you for another sort of nuance here. We mentioned that the presence of a psychiatric disorder increases the risk. Can you help us understand a little bit more about the link between those two things?
Yeah, I wish I knew it as strong as the link is. I wish that's how much we really understood it. But first of all, there are certain mental health conditions in particular, depression, substance use, bipolar disorder, and psychosis, that often co-occur or occur in combination with things like eating disorder or other disorders that increase the risk. Now, each of these contributes differently to suicide. But what happens when you have a mental health condition and these other risk factors for suicide? That's the key. It's not just having a mental health condition. But what we think happens is the person's thinking is not working as well. So think about when you have a cold and try to make a decision, and that's just a cold. So imagine if you have a mental health disorder and you are feeling terrible pain and you have these other risk factors of like head trauma, family history, and then you are faced with a stressor. Your capacity to think flexibly and your access to your usual problem solving may be diminished. So what even looks like a decision is really coming out of pain and desperation. When people have a mental health condition, they're already not feeling well. They're already feeling in pain. And when they have other risk factors, that can compromise their ability to problem solve and their ability to make decisions. They, for instance, they don't think it towards the future. They're very much into solving problems right this second, right now. And I wanted to say that most people who engage in suicidal behavior are probably not even thinking about dying. They're thinking about ending the pain. What can I do to stop this because I am desperate? And I think a good example of the thinking is, and this is the thing about connection. I think you keep hearing the loneliness, not connecting, but it's really something that I call disconnection, DYS, a dysfunctional connection. And it's how a kid can say, I love my parents and my parents love me, but they'll be better off without me because I'm a burden. So I'm just going to end it all. So I think that's a really good example of how the brain of someone who's in a suicidal, increased risk for suicidal behavior thinks. So their decision making is off a little bit, their flexibility of thinking is off. And then if they have a mental health condition, which they almost always do, maybe they're using some substances, so they're really not fully there. They're feeling pretty awful. And I think that's how they go together. And they might act under certain circumstances. And that's why with kids in particular, because they are more apt to make an impulsive attempt, not to have access to lethal means around, because they will grab at it and use it, whatever it is. And I think this is something really hard for us to understand, because things can be around all the time and they're fine. And then suddenly it's not fine.
Yeah.
So treating a mental health condition will help sometimes with suicide prevention, but it doesn't always solve the problem for suicide risk.
Thank you. John, I want to go to you, and I'm going to combine a question that we had planned to ask with a question from Christine Mason here. So, what are the most common misconceptions or barriers about teen suicide risk that may prevent or delay early detection? And into that, I'm going to throw Christine Mason's question, so everybody can read it. But essentially, the advice is, or the question is, I have several parents who are in denial about their child's suicidality and are brushing it off. Includes guardians, not necessarily biological parents. How can we, as LCMHC and or social workers, best approach parents, guardians who are in constant denial? And by the way, everyone feel free to build on John's question. Not trying to put you on an island here.
Yeah. So, in terms of the most common misconceptions, I think we started to hear, or we did hear about this in some of the comments that Lindsay and Jill were making. One is around just not believing that there's a problem. And I'm thinking about, the adults and the caregivers in the young person's life, just thinking that this is normal teen behavior. And because it is difficult to tease out sort of what's typical and normal and what's not normal. So a lot of rationalization can happen around the young person. And then as a result, family caregivers, they want to believe everything's okay and they hesitate to ask, and they don't do what Jill recommended, which is to check in. Are you okay? I'm concerned. You seem to be, withdrawing more, or not spending as much time with your friends, and having that conversation and trusting your gut instinct that something might be off here. Because again, you're not doing any harm. So lean into it, and together with AFSP, we have a campaign called Seize the Awkward. The whole idea is awkward, seize it, do it, and have the conversation with someone else, including a teen or young adult if you're concerned about them. The thing I want to add to this also, though, is we do a lot of research with market research with teens and young adults. And actually, a lot of the time, they don't realize something's wrong with them. They realize something's wrong, but they think it's who they are. They think something's wrong with them, not that it's something that can be addressed or helped. They don't realize that help is available, and they don't realize that help is helpful, because they sort of don't know, right? And if they do feel like they're having a problem, there are some attitudinal barriers and behavioral barriers to seeking help that I think it's important that that caregivers and parents recognize. One is there's a hesitation to go to your caregivers or your parents because of a concern that the parent is trying to solve your problem. They're not listening, right? They're jumping in and they're trying to solve the problem, or they might make the matter worse. So it's really important to be a careful listener and to sort of, I guess, have that established in the relationship with the young person, that if they come to you, that you'll listen and really let them get everything out that they need to get out. Because in our research, young people express that they like the way their friends listen to them, but their friends don't really have advice that's very helpful or actionable. They trust their parents to have more actionable advice, but the parents don't actually listen and try to jump in too quickly. So, sort of creating that environment or that context with the young person is really important. And having these conversations so they know it's okay not to be okay. They know it's okay to go ahead and to have these questions. In terms of the question about what do you do if you're worried about a young person, and the parent isn't. I'm going to answer this from the question of being an aunt, an uncle, a family friend. You asked the question from the perspective of being a provider. I think Lindsay or Jill or Dan should answer the question from the perspective of being a provider. But non-parent supportive adult relationships are very important and very protective in the lives of young people. So if you're a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, a family friend, and you do what we talked about. Literally ask that team that's in your life and that you love if they're okay. How can you help? How can you be supportive? And I say this with all respect in the world to the parents in the picture, but especially if the teen is a little bit older, talk to them yourself. Talk to them yourself. They need help. They need connection with a network of supportive and caring adults, and continue to talk to the parents and your friend or your relative about the importance and what you're seeing and why you're concerned about it. But for the part of your question about how a provider should handle it, I pass to my colleagues here.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in, John. That was great. And our goal here is to provide people with really concrete hands-on takeaways here. So to your point on not fixing every problem, but being a listening source, that's hard for parents to do. It's a developmental task for parents to move from taking care of a toddler that needs you to do everything, quite literally, to gradually giving and allowing and sitting with your aging child, adolescent, and young adults, having more autonomy, independence, and making their own choices. So that's tough. I'm going to read off some very specific quotes that you guys can use when you want to validate your child instead of trying to fix a problem. So it may be really, your first response may be a thing like, you have a great life. Why would you end it? Everything's going to be fine. You don't mean that. I can't believe this. Some of this is shame driven, right? Parents, it's a lot to hear something like this. This is scary. There may be something of your own mental health going on. And it's shameful to think that your child is suffering like this. So examples of a validating response that shows you're listening non-judgmentally. I'm so sorry you're feeling this way. I would really like to hear a bit more. It sounds like you are in tremendous pain. It sounds like you can't see a way out of this. Right now, you don't know the answers and you don't know how to face the problems in your life. You must really, really be hurting inside. And those almost feel like, I don't know, they feel like useless statements, right? They feel like I'm just parroting back something, but I'm not offering anything. But I think we can all remember maybe a time in our life when somebody gave us that type of listening ear and how wonderful it felt. And you are establishing yourself as a parent who is a safe place, who is non-judgmental, and who wants to hear from you. And it's about navigating the things that, the things that are normal, to let them go explore on their own and be comfortable with the fact that they are going to learn how to solve more and more of their problems, while also being very clear about the things that are non-negotiable, that you really want to be helpful with, that you want to set up an environment in your home that you're going to ask, and it's going to be normal, and it's not going to be scary to talk about these things. And I want to share an example of that from my own childhood. And can I just say, I see my mother is attending right now, an example of how parents never stop supporting and loving and connecting to their children. That's what we want to do for our children. We want to form connection. We want them to always feel loved. We want them to feel we're interested in them. And my parents have done that. And when I was growing up, they trusted us to make all sorts of mistakes and figure things out on our own. And one thing that they made non-negotiable was, if you're ever in a situation where the only option is to be with a drunk driver or to drive drunk yourself, you call us anytime, any day, day or night. You will not be in trouble. There will be no judgment. This is non-negotiable. I knew that that was a safe item that I could go to them for help and I would be okay. And that's the version of my childhood. And we all can create those differences so that it's not a scary thing to ask for the very most important things in life. And also, have some freedom to experiment, make mistakes, and mess up where it's okay to do so.
I'd also like to add, Lindsay and John, I think everything you said was so helpful. So I want to also add from the parents' perspective, because I totally agree with all that. But from a parent's perspective, either you're terrified or you don't understand. And so if you're having this conversation or someone tells you should have this conversation and you're not sure, get some help and talk to somebody. Talk to a friend, talk to clergy, talk to a therapist, but understand it's really hard for parents and to really wrap their head around that it's hard for many of us to feel that somebody could feel so terrible that they don't want to be alive anymore. And it's also very scary. So if you're a parent, talk to other parents, go online and look for things you could do. Get some advice. And I also saw that somebody put up safety planning. And so as a clinician, putting my clinician hat back on, I don't need to just rely on the parents because I've done a safety plan with my person. The parents know the safety plan, or they should, but other people that a teen can talk to are also listed and their phone numbers are there so that there are other people the teen can talk to. A lot of times the parent isn't the person, or not yet. There are therapies like attachment-based family therapy that help parents and kids learn to talk. And how do they do that? They separate them and help them find each other's perspective, because you can only be where you are. And the idea is to help. I thought with Seize the Awkward, when they were putting it together, this just really resonated for me. They were looking for a process. And what they said was, when a kid is not feeling well, I'm going to raise my hands, they move away from people. And then their friends move away from them, and their family moves away. And so the process that's effective is helping them come back together. And I think that's true for the parents, and I think it's true for peers. If you see that division happening, then focus on working to get back together again. And there's no, as Lindsay said, it's not like there's an answer, do this and that's going to happen. But know that there's a divide there, and you both have to cross it.
Thank you. Dan, I want to go to you. Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to chime in here from that clinical perspective again. If you're a provider out there and you're working with somebody and they just don't seem to want to pay attention, they don't want to listen, they don't want to believe that this could be happening. All of the things that you've heard are really important. One of the things you can do is take it outside of them and give them a scenario of if this was one of your friends, one of your kids' friends, and they came to you and they said these things to you, what might you do? If this was a niece or a nephew, take it away, one step away from them, to give them just a little bit of distance. You just heard Jill talking about a little bit of distance. Sometimes it's just too overwhelming for them. As you heard her say, it's too scary to think about that it could be their kid that could really be in that kind of distress. So take it away, and that gives them a perspective to look at the situation and go, oh, wow, if this was really what was going on for my kid, then I probably would want to try to do that. Another thing you can do as a clinician is provide some education and information. You can give some of the warning signs. You've heard some of those. You give some of the risk factors, And you can give some suggestions and say, how do these fit? Have you seen these things? Earlier on, you heard Jill talking a lot about some of the risk factors, and you heard both Jill and Lindsay talking about changes, sudden changes. It's really easy to say to a parent, is your kid acting out of character of who you really know? Do you really know them? And if something is out of character for them, that's a time when you really might need to step in. Now, it might not be suicide related, it might be. But the idea is if you can take it away from them just a little bit, give them a little distance, they might be able to see things more clearly. I wanted to follow up on one other piece here, because you heard a lot of great suggestions from all of the panel members about these having open and honest conversations, how to do that. Oftentimes, you will hear parents saying to their kids, when I was a kid, this is what it was like for me. I went through that too. Oh, it was way worse for me. Let me tell you what my situation was. None of those things are a good idea. That's not what the kids want to hear. You do want to do all the things you heard already. Ask really open-ended questions. As John said, lean into the conversation. The more you can model that this is a safe conversation, and it doesn't necessarily mean, oh, you're going to be taken to a hospital and we're going to put you in a place where they're going to lock the door behind you. That you need to take that away from them and make it okay to have the conversation. Oftentimes, even if somebody has thought about suicide, maybe they haven't made a plan, they don't really have an intention for it, but it is something swirling in their mind and it's scaring them. Just having that conversation can de-escalate them and pull them back to where they need to be. You can set up a plan. You just heard about a safety plan. You can set up a plan, a conversation, a way to check in, a way to monitor it. And you can really kind of get them through the crisis phase if you do some of those things. And for young people, listen more for behavioral kinds of things. For an older adolescent, they might be able to process things a little bit differently, think differently. So you're going to need to listen a little bit differently depending on the age of the kid. But all of these things are the things you can do to have these open conversations with young people and with your clients.
Thank you. So I want to get into more of the solutions, which I think is where the conversation was already getting to. So John, we talked about risk factors. Now let's flip it. Let's talk about protective factors. What are some protective factors for youth mental health, and essentially how can parents and educators help foster them?
Sure. So one domain is life skills. So, and when I say life skills, what I mean are problem-solving skills, coping skills, which were referenced earlier. Things like conflict resolution skills, independent living skills, social emotional skills. So let me just unpack that a little bit, right? You want your young person as they're developing to sort of learn how to navigate the world on their own. So give them the space to solve their own problems. Don't jump in right away to help solve problems. Put them in positions where they can advocate for themselves with teachers, right, and with others and other adults, and grow and develop that way. Have them, get the experiences of spending time away from home. Now, if that might be a camp, but perhaps it's just spending time at a grandparent's house or a relative's house, but learning to sort of be independent. Can they cook on their own? Do they know how to do laundry? These life skills can be quite protective for young people. So it's almost like, as your teenager is starting to age, go on strike as a parent. Like, in a positive, fun way, but go on strike and have them sort of, develop their independent living skills. Mental health literacy is very important. So really understanding, what is positive mental health and well-being, what are things to watch out for, and again, knowing they're in a safe space. Connectedness and a sense of belonging is very protective, right? It's the antidote to isolation. So supportive adult relationships with extended family, friends, religious and community connections are all protective. So finding ways to be active in clubs, perhaps in athletics, outdoor activities, hobbies, all these kinds of things can be protective for young people. So let me make just a reference here to the Surgeon General's recommendations around youth mental health. Two things the Surgeon General recommended were supportive adult relationships as being protective, And the other was safe and supportive environments. So really working to make sure that our homes and our schools and community-based organizations are places where help seeking is being promoted, well-being is being promoted, right? And access to lethal means is being restricted. So all of these kinds of things are protective for our mental health. And we want also, so for those young people that do have an emerging mental illness, since we know that half of all mental illness expresses itself in some way before age 14, is for all of this to come together in a way that they can be noticed and recognized and connected to care quickly, from the point that the symptoms are first emerging. And today it still takes some 8 or 10 years or more for an accurate recognition and diagnosis to happen.
Yeah. I want to pivot a little bit because there's a question here from anonymous attendee a minute ago asking about practical, accessible interventions. So, Lindsay, I want to take it to you now. How can cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy be used to support teens with suicidal thoughts? I think that's a lot of your work at McLean.
Yes, thanks, Shai. Yes, so I have worked with dozens of families of youth who have struggled with suicidal thoughts, attempts, self-injury. And one thing I've really learned over all those years in rooms with families is that understanding one's emotional experience and their feelings and their emotions is not an innate skill that we are born with. And especially during development and adolescence, when your world becomes more complex, your social world becomes more complex, your feelings get bigger and life gets tougher, frankly, it is very difficult for a lot of youth to understand and put words to what they are experiencing. And sometimes we hear things like, I don't want to live any longer, or I am hopeless, or I want to hurt myself. And this is not dismissive of the seriousness of those statements, but someone like myself who is trained and experienced with exploring that can get to a place where, like, okay, this child is doing the very best they can to express their distress and get their needs met. And it's not truly that they want to kill themselves and they have a plan. It's that they don't know how to talk about or understand the very big feelings that they have. And so what CBT and DBT do, these are evidence-based practices that teach skills to first understand and name emotions, which is an incredibly empowering skill to have. If I know that I'm feeling shameful because I didn't do well at X, Y, and Z, and I can understand that, wow, okay, at least I know what I'm dealing with and it makes sense, right? That is it gives me a language. I can say I'm feeling shameful instead of saying I want to die, which scares everybody. It scares everybody, as it should. Okay, so emotion identification and expression, and then these therapies go into skills that target emotion regulation. So really learning to regulate the big feelings that can be where the impulsive and the unsafe behavior stems from, takes place. And distress tolerance. So we all face distress all day long, right? And we have to learn to sit and tolerate it effectively. And then also mindfulness, being in tune with oneself, connecting the dots that I had a really lousy conversation with my friend, and now I'm feeling pretty crappy. And A plus B equals crappy. And I can understand that. And now I know how to tackle the problem as opposed to feeling hopeless and kind of deferring to language or terms or ideas that they hear and are trying on and are just doing their very best to get their needs met. And it's our job as professionals to teach them how to do so more effectively. That's one of my favorite things about working with these interventions with the kids and teenagers is we can teach them to be more empowered, to more accurately describe, talk about, understand what they're feeling in their very complex emotional inner world. And often it really has nothing to do with high risk, safety concerns, suicidality, but those words have to be taken seriously by all the adults around them. And we're not really tackling the actual problem, or giving them the help that they need necessarily. So someone like myself is trained and comfortable in doing that. Not all therapists are, but thinking about finding somebody who can tolerate these scary words and terms, know when to act on it seriously, but also know when we got something else here that we can teach you how to manage this. We can teach you how to talk about it. We can teach your parents that instead of it being a cry for help, or it's just attention, or you don't mean it, your child is doing the best they can to get their needs met. And it's our job to teach them how to do so more effectively. That's a much kinder and more non-judgmental way of, managing a very frustrating part or scary part of parenting.
Thank you. I want to go next to sort of the next circle around the teen. So Jill, I'll go to you. How can family and peers get involved and support without overwhelming teens or infringing on their desire for independence?
So, what they want to say about independence is we mix that up with doing things alone. So I think the first thing is to help teens understand that being independent is about knowing who you need to lean on when. And I actually call it building your entourage, right? Like, I don't fix my car, and trust me, I shouldn't. So what family and I don't actually know how to open the hood, so it'd be tough. I think that helping family and friends and teachers and doctors and clergy can serve as a teen's entourage. They don't have to fix anything. So again, what we know works is having some support and being able to talk about what's going on. And that's what also helps with emotional growth, along with the therapy that Lindsay, you did such a beautiful job of explaining. So what we can do is be present. I say we because I am also parent, grandparent. We can be present. We can learn, go to Seize the Awkward, learn how to ask the questions, learn about mental health, learn about what your person needs. And remember, that person isn't the only person in that person's life either. Like, it's community. So building a community that has resources, that knows where to go when professional help is necessary, is really building a safe community. So as a friend, you can check in regularly. You can sit on the couch and watch videos with them without saying a word. As a parent, you can just make go for ice cream, if you like ice cream. I figure that's universal. Just be together. You don't necessarily always have to be monitoring them or finding out. So my kids had special needs, so I actually used to leave pamphlets around the house because I knew my kids would read them if they were on the table and nobody was around, or maybe even my husband. So get information and leave it around. Find stories of hope. Connect people with people who have been through tough times and gotten through it. Seize the Awkward is a great place for that as well. AFSP.org is a great place for that. To get informed, gather around, and just be present and help remember what it is you really love or support or appreciate about the person. And try to expand your focus away from just being worried about them.
Thank you. I want to go to the. Oh, sorry.
Can I add something in here? One thing that I want to add in what Jill was saying, for kids, because young kids, if their friend is in distress and they know about it, they feel overwhelmed, they're scared, and they want to keep it a secret. If we can help them understand that in this case, secret isn't a good thing, secrets can be deadly, that's really important. Helping them understand that that there might be other things going on and they don't need to solve that problem, but we can get you to the right place. We can get you to the right people to help but not keeping it a secret, not carrying that burden is really, really important to share with them. And I think that if we do that, we help everybody involved, and we take some of the burden off of this and we spread it around, that entourage that Joe was just talking about, that helps navigate through some of these crisis moments for people.
I
Absolutely.
think people need to know where to go. So a school has to have a suicide prevention infrastructure that everybody knows about, not just for if there's a suicide, but where does a kid in distress go? Where does a parent go? So there are ways to set up different levels. So there's the school, there's the community, there's the peer groups. And Dan, I so agree. I tend to be very blunt about it and say an angry friend is better than a dead friend, and there are no secrets. That if you want to help your friend, you don't keep secrets. And I think that's really critical for parents as well. Because sometimes one parent will say, don't tell the other parent, or don't tell my teachers, and that just limits the capacity to help. So, you know, if you're not feeling well and you don't feel safe, I'm going to do everything in my power to help you feel better.
Mhm.
And as a therapist, I say that. And when my child had depression, that's what I said. We're going to get through this. It's going to take a while. It's going to be slow, but I will be with you every step along the way. And I think that's really comforting. And then you have to do it, and understand when people are struggling with substances, or they're struggling with depression and they can't move, or they can't go out of the house because they're so anxious, that's not on purpose. They would much rather be out with their friends having a good time. That's called a mental health condition. When it's impairing your capacity, that's a mental health condition, and treatment is needed.
Thank you. I want to expand the next circle of support, which is school. I have a surprise guest here. So this session was inspired by a story in the New York Times about a suicide cluster at Worcester Polytechnic Institute in Massachusetts. Ben Nephew is from the university, so I asked him to maybe spend a couple of minutes telling us about their experience at the university as they were dealing with this horrible strategy. Ben, thank you for sharing your experience with us.
Yeah, no, thanks for everyone, sharing their experience and expertise here. Obviously, it's a very important topic, and we struggled, quite severely from this. So there were 6 suicides over the course of 6 months, back in 2021, 22. And I mean, a lot of this discussion seems focused on earlier age groups, but the big challenge we had at WPI is, how do you deal with children, once they hit 18, at an institutional level, and also, concerns about, there was obviously a major struggle where, by the time there were multiple suicides with regards to, the debate on a contagion effect. I mean, 6 and 6 months, how the university dealt with that, and it was very challenging. Some of the issues that we're exploring, after this, fortunately things have improved drastically since then. Is the role of social media and mental health, and in terms of like, what can you do with regards to reaching isolated kids at college age, when communication. And I asked this question in the chat with regards to, I'm real curious as to, we talk about the importance of meaningful communication, and modern methods of communication don't seem necessarily meaningful at all times. And I wonder what your thoughts are on this with regards to, parents and children, as well as between teens. Are some of the increases related to, these challenges and decrease in meaningful communication due to, we're debating like how to return to class at WPI with regards to in-person or hybrid, or and that varies from school to school, and you definitely see the kids that are struggling take advantage of the hybrid option. And I don't know if having that option is the best thing for them. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that for now, and happy to hear your thoughts on any of this.
Thank you.
So can I just say that I wish there was one solution, Ben? But actually every student is different. And so for some kids, they did very well at home because they were relieved of the social pressures they were experiencing at school. And for some kids really did very poorly at home because home was not a safe place for them. And I think it does get back to knowing the person and getting to know who they are, what their resources and risk factors are, and working from that point. And then you can say, I really think that for you, being home all day on a computer is probably not a great idea. Or for you, clubs may be too much pressure. You may want to do, so there, all of that can be true, but for different people. And it really gets down to knowing the particular teen. And that comes from having conversations. And I think that communication now with social media and all that is really different. And none of us grew up with that. So I'm guessing it's hard to understand and it's different, but it's not all bad. People are connecting in ways that they never connected before. There are communities available to isolated kids that were never available before. So it's really how people are using their communication tools. And when you're not problem solving great, you're probably not using your communication tools great either.
Mhm. Thank you. Thanks so much, and thank you again for sharing and jumping on, Ben. John, I want to go to you next, and just very tangibly, I want to talk about what schools can do. What is the role of schools?
Well, schools at every level, right, are the place where young people spend most of their time. So schools are an incredible opportunity to create a mental health safety net and a culture of caring. And so what we should expect from schools at every level, I say every level, I mean pre-K through 12, high schools, colleges, universities, they should declare student mental health as one of their top priorities, and they should have a plan that's available, literally a written plan on how they're supporting student mental health that includes the things we've talked about. So a holistic plan that includes things like how are they developing the life skills and the social emotional skills of the students? How are they creating connectedness and a sense of belonging and reducing risks for isolation? How are they promoting help seeking and reducing stigma? What are the mechanisms to notice and identify if a student is struggling and then connect them to care? And how is care being provided? Is it being provided in the school? Are they referring to providers outside the school? Are they augmenting with telebehavioral health? What are the protocols around when and how a family is contacted? How are they handling a crisis? Are they ready for a post-vention situation? What does that look like? And how do they make sure the environment is safe? So there's a lot of detail to that, and really too much detail for this discussion. But the takeaway is that people that are in community with schools really should be talking to school and school leadership about making sure they have a purposeful plan. They have a team that's overseeing that planning, and that it's mapping to evidence-based practices so that students that are struggling will be recognized, they will be connected to, and the school will help connect them to care. That's really the takeaway that we should all expect from the schools in our communities.
Thank you. Just aware of time here, so I do have probably two last critical questions. This one to Dan. What should parents do immediately if they're concerned that their teen is at risk right now?
The first thing that they should do is make sure they're safe. Ensure that they don't have anything they can hurt themselves. Try to find out if they might have ingested something or if they've done something that could be lethal to them. And then they might need to respond. They might need to get them to an ER right away. But to make sure they're safe is really the first thing. And then once you assess the situation, if they're safe in the very immediate right now, are they going to be able to be safe? Can they be safe at home or not? Are they at risk of running off? Are they at risk of doing something that's going to hurt themselves in a non-structured environment like a hospital? You may need to bring them to an emergency room for an assessment. You might not. As a fact, many times you don't. You just need to create an agreement with them, a plan with them to be able to keep them safe and to be monitoring them, make sure the environment is safe so they don't have access to many of the lethal means that you've heard about today. So really, in the immediate concern, if you're really worried about somebody, make sure they're safe and make sure that they're going to be safe when you're not present with them, you're not watching them all the time. And then I would say, figure out a way to check in with them. I often tell patients and families, use a 1 to 10 scale. If you're at a 1, everything is fine. If you're at a 10, we need to sit down and have a conversation to figure out what's going to happen. If you're at a 5 or 6, I might ask you a couple more questions just to see if you're okay. But you don't want to overprotect, you don't want to overhover them. But if there is some real concern, you got to make sure they're safe and that they know that they're going to be taken care of.
Thank you. Last question. This is for all of you, and I'd like an answer from 3 of you. People here, we have over 500 people here. They want to know about more resources. So please share with them, where can they find more resources from your respective organizations?
Well, from American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, you can go to AFSP, for American Foundation for Suicide Prevention.org. And there are lots of information, several different entry points. I also want to add, if it's an emergency, 988 or crisis text line 741-741. But there's lots of information, particularly for parents, at afsp.org.
Thank you.
And I'll jump in and say for the JED Foundation, it's jedfoundation.org. And the same with a lot of information for youth, for families, parents, and a lot of information about schools and what schools can do.
And I would say you can go to save.org, or you can go to the Mental Health Coalition. There's a huge resource library there. It includes information from both of these 2 great organizations and about 35 other organizations as well. So mentalhealthcoalition.org is another resource.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. And to everyone listening, along with the recording on the same page, we will have links to all of these resources. I want to thank our panelists here. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you for the actionable advice. I want to thank the participants who took time out of their busy afternoons, and especially to Ben Nephew from WPI for sharing. And we will see you next month for additional topics. Thanks again, and be safe. Bye-bye.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
all.